Arnold was the Alliance's youngest admiral, a man of unmatched military glory. Yet, he was unwillingly tied to me as my alpha. On the day we registered, I offered him a bouquet of flowers. He tossed it into the trash without a single glance, then took off his wedding ring. His voice was as cold as ice. "Don't let anyone know you're my Omega. Stay away from me, and don't do anything pointless." Later, when the war ended, amidst the cheering crowd celebrating our victory, he stood there, eyes red as he roared, "Where is my Omega? Why hasn't he returned?" The crimson slowly spread beneath me. I smiled weakly. It seemed I couldn't go back. Behind the ruined bunker, a warm beam of orange sunset fell perfectly onto Brant's ash-smudged profile. He leaned against the rough wall, his wet, heavy eyelashes drooping helplessly, yet a soft curve of liberation graced the corners of his lips. The deep crimson rapidly blossomed across his pristine white medic uniform, like a late-blooming cherry blossom quietly unfolding in the night. Brant's trembling fingers lost their grip, and his medical kit crashed to the ground, a vial of coagulant rolling into the golden dust. If his death could buy the order to annul their marriage, perhaps the frost in the eyes of that forever unreachable, glacier-like admiral might melt just a little. The agonizing pain faded along with his fading body heat. Brant felt as though a warm cluster of cotton was lifting him up. He opened his eyes, his vision no longer bound by gravity. He hovered silently in midair, looking down at the quiet shell of a body on the ground. As the smoke cleared, Brant's transparent fingertips passed through the rubble. Guided by a familiar magnetic pull, he drifted toward the rendezvous point. He only hoped the little girl he had risked his life to save could safely deliver the black box to Arnold. In the distance, the tall man stood tall at the very front of the squad, the shadow of his military cap coldly carved across his brow, leaving only the sharp line of his jaw and the rhythmic rise and fall of his Adam's apple. Without him doing a single thing, the surrounding light seemed to freeze under an invisible, icy mist. The sheer domination of his presence made everyone's breathing catch in their throats. "Where is the combat medic?" "Step forward," Arnold commanded, his voice freezing. Carrie stepped out of the ranks, standing merely inches away from Arnold. This close, he would definitely smell the pheromones. In that instant, Brant saw a subtle ripple in the air beside Carrie, as if a heavy pine branch soaked in rain had silently slammed against his neck. Carrie's breathing hitched immediately. An uncontrollable flush, like oxygen deprivation, spread across his cheeks, and his shoulders shrank back violently. Where did Brant go? Arnold took a threatening step forward. "I don't know." Carrie lowered his voice. "Brant has always been undisciplined. Maybe he got scared of getting hurt this time and ran." "Is that so?" A completely joyless curve tugged at the corner of Arnold's mouth as he turned back to the formation. Brant rushed forward in a panic, his transparent fingers clawing desperately at that dark navy cuff. "How could I be a deserter? We've been married for a year. How could you believe someone else and think I'm that kind of person?" But his fingertips phased right through the fabric, grasping nothing but emptiness. A full year of marriage, yet they were total strangers. After all, Arnold never wanted to marry him in the first place. Forced together by the cold, calculated data of the Council's matching system, their 100% compatibility had locked them in an inescapable bond. The light on the day of their registration was blindingly pale. Brant had held a bright bouquet, his eyes brimming with quiet joy. However, Arnold's long fingers simply swept the delicate flowers into a metal trash can. The wedding ring, the ultimate symbol of their union, was tossed carelessly onto the table, ringing out with a crisp, cold sound. "Don't let anyone know you're my Omega." Arnold's gaze was like a polar glacier. "Stay away from me, and don't do anything pointless." But that uncrossable glacier had violently lost control just the morning before. The faint light of dawn illuminated the red marks scattered across the side of Brant's neck. He hurriedly pulled up his collar and pushed out of Arnold's dorm room. The lingering scent of an alpha on his skin set off silent alarms in the hallway, drawing stunned looks from passing soldiers. Inside a cramped bathroom, the cold glow of a screen lit up the thin sheen of sweat on Brant's nose. His trembling fingertips typed frantically, "Admiral Arnold, I am so sorry about last night and this morning. If anyone suspects anything, I will tell them I went to your dorm to discuss intel." After half an hour of dead silence, the screen lit up with merciless words. "Did HQ forget to test your IQ when they drafted you?" Brant bit his lower lip hard, the corners of his eyes turning a pitiful red as he forced himself to reply. "Then ill say the marks on me were left by another alpha. I absolutely won't drag you down." What followed was a suffocating silence. Brant smiled bitterly. Arnold really hated him. Yet, last night, during that night of sheer madness, that overwhelming power of an S-class alpha had held him in an inescapable, undeniable domination. The assembly whistle blew. The steel doors of the armored vehicle blasted open, and harsh searchlights cleaved through the darkness. Arnold stood outside the door like a solitary peak. His dark navy tactical gloves met the hands of the jumping soldiers one by one, echoing with a steady, muffled thud of high fives. Brant was at the very back of the line. He rubbed his sweaty palms hard against his rough combat uniform, a tiny but bright smile pulling at his lips as he raised his hand early. However, as that dark blue cuff approached, carrying the biting wind, the broad hand smoothly diverted its path in midair. Arnold's long fingers landed on the brim of his military cap, pressing down lightly. Their eyes met briefly in the dim light, but that leather glove never offered Brant even a millimeter of contact. The smile froze on Brant's lips. Humiliated, he curled his fingers into a tight fist and slowly pulled his hand back to his chest. Now, hovering in midair, Brant stared at Arnold, his transparent fingertips curling slightly. If he had just gotten that high five from the admiral back then, would he still be lying here bathed in crimson? "Brant, do you copy? Respond." The wind died down, leaving only the piercing white noise of static in the earpiece. Arnold stared dead at the unresponsive comms channel. His jaw muscles tightened violently from the sheer force of clenching his teeth, and his lips pressed into a razor-sharp line. "Brant, do you copy? Respond." His voice suddenly dropped, seeping with an overwhelmingly oppressive ferocity. That fierce tone was exactly the same as when he called Brant's name the night before. Truth be told, his tone had shifted several times that night. When Brant suddenly barged into Arnold's dorm in the middle of the night, Arnold was stunned. Then, Arnold realized Brant was completely out of his mind, consumed by his heat. He tried to wake Brant up using his coldest, hardest voice. The battle-hardened admiral failed. He lowered his voice, calling Brant's name with harsh intensity. Then, he ordered Brant not to move. Brant couldn't bear to think about the details. Replaying even a single frame of that memory would make him want to flee the planet out of sheer humiliation. When the blinding morning light pierced through the gloom, Brant jolted awake amidst the tangled sheets. The bathroom door was half open. Freezing water cascaded over Arnold's broad back, tracing the deep, mountainous lines of his muscles, stretched taut under the stream. Those hands which had claimed him with an irresistible magnetism were now under the faucet. He was scrubbing his knuckles inch by inch, almost obsessively. Brant buried his burning face deeply into his palms until the gland at the back of his neck flared up again with a humiliating, scorching heat. He threw on his wrinkled clothes and stood at the door. Arnold shut off the valve, cutting the sound of the water dead. He turned around, water droplets sliding down the icy line of his jaw. "Brant, I told you not to do anything pointless." The man's eyes were like frozen tundra. "I will not mark you. The war will end soon, and when it does, we will annul this marriage." In that exact moment, Brant's throat felt as if it had been poured full of cold lead. He couldn't make a single sound. Back in reality, the communicator remained dead silent. Arnold ground his back teeth together and tore off the headset. "Search for the hostages with everything you have. If you find Brant, bring him to me immediately." The squad scattered into the jungle like a gray tide. In the empty clearing, Arnold suddenly spun around, his sharp gaze stabbing directly toward where Brant was floating. "Why are you here?" Thinking Arnold had actually seen him, Brant gasped, his transparent eyes instantly going wide. "Admiral Arnold, may I ask you a question?" Heavy combat boots stepped right through Brant's ethereal form. Carrie stood right behind where Brant was, his gaze passing right through the pocket of transparent air, gluing itself intensely onto Arnold. Brant froze between the two of them, like a dead man on death row with an invisible bayonet pressed to his neck. Ask. Arnold's voice was like ice water tempered in the extreme cold. Rumor has it that Brant is your Omega. Is that true? A probing dark light flickered in Carrie's eyes. The surrounding temperature plummeted. It was as if an invisible frost instantly crept over the nearby vines, the bone-chilling cold crushing the nerves of everyone present. Arnold's brows furrowed dangerously low, a terrifying darkness gathering in his eyes. Who said that? Every word seemed crushed out from between his teeth. Spreading that kind of garbage in the Alliance army. Are you looking to be locked up and solitary? Hearing this absolute unyielding denial, Carrie smiled in relief. A light breeze swept up fallen leaves, passing through Brant's empty chest without any resistance. There was no physical pain, only a thick, suffocating humiliation, like cold, muddy seawater slowly rising over his head. Report. All hostages rescued. A shout rang out from the distance. Then what about the little girl he had risked everything to protect? Brant's spirit form shuddered violently, frantically rushing over the bushes. Just a little ahead, Carrie lunged into the tall grass, pinning a 6- or 7-year-old girl hard into the mud. A silver memory drive slipped from the girl's pocket, refracting a cold light in the filthy dirt. Carrie's pupils dilated instantly as he snatched up the drive. The little girl trembled all over, her sobbing voice broken. The Omega brother with the Red Cross armband told me to give it to Admiral Arnold. Please go save him. Hez badly wounded. Carrie quickly clamped a hand over the girl's mouth. His greedy eyes scanned the area as he lowered his voice. I know the Admiral. I'll give it to him for you, and I'll go save him. But you can't tell anyone about what happened today, understand? Watching Carrie push the girl toward the other officers while tightly gripping the drive in his palm, Brant watched him turn and walk back toward Arnold. Hovering in mid-air, Brant's transparent fingertips trembled slightly, but a weak, ultimate sense of relief washed through his eyes. That's good, he thought. The black box has been delivered, and I am finally about to be set free. Admiral. Carrie didn't even bother to salute, waving his arm as he sprinted over, clutching the silver memory drive. The warm light of the setting sun hit Arnold's navy epaulets. He swiftly took the drive, an urgent edge showing through his sharp brow. Where did you find this? Did Brant bring it back? No. Carrie's eyelashes fluttered rapidly, dodging that intensely dominating gaze. I found it at the firefight zone. The enemy must have dropped it. Hovering in mid-air, Brant threw himself forward in absolute despair. Carrie, why are you lying? His transparent fingertips passed uselessly through Arnold's shoulder over and over again. All he could do was watch helplessly as Arnold pocketed the drive. Looks like you have good luck. Arnold withdrew his gaze. Any news on Dr. Brant? Carrie stayed silent for a few seconds, then slowly shook his head. Anything else? Arnold turned to leave. Admiral, if this counts as a major merit, may I ask a question? Carrie looked up, a secret hope flashing in his eyes. What kind of Omega? Will you marry in the future? The distant clamor rushed in at that exact moment. Rescued military families and soldiers were locked in tight embraces. The warm orange sunset cast a fuzzy golden halo around their silhouettes, and the air was thick with the warm moisture of tears of joy. Arnold quietly watched that soft glow. Within his deep pupils, the eternal glacier miraculously melted, just a fraction. Someone I truly love, I suppose. His voice was broken apart by the gentle breeze, carrying an unprecedented softness. That soft whisper fell against Brant's empty chest like a warm, tender feather. A relieved smile graced Brant's transparent lips. Yes, he thought. A lofty hero like him should be surrounded by flowers and applause, holding the hand of an Omega he truly loves, completing every sacred and perfect ritual. He shouldn't be chained to someone he doesn't love by a cold piece of matching data, left with a lifetime of regrets. As long as he disappeared, everything could go back to the way it was supposed to be. If he just wanted a little less, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. Admiral Arnold, all personnel have assembled. Shall we return to base? The captain's request shattered the brief peace. Arnold's jawline snapped back into a hard, cold line. He grabbed the communicator, his knuckles turning white. Brant, if you're doing this just to get my attention, it's not too late to come back now. If I have to drag you out myself, you are out of the Alliance army. Only the dead hum of static answered him. Arnold's chest heaved violently once before. He snapped his head around to give an order. Take the families back to base. The rest of you, follow me into the camp to find him. Admiral. Carrie blocked his path in sheer panic. If we don't stick to the informant's route, well-hit traps and explosives, Brant isn't worth Carrie. The air around them instantly stagnated at that explosive roar. An invisible, crushing pressure blasted outward with Arnold at its epicenter. The loose rocks on the ground began to tremble uneasily. Carrie's face drained of color, his knees giving out, almost crushed to the ground by the terrifying domination of his energy. Say one more word, and you're going straight to solitary. Arnold's gaze was like looking at a dead body. The squad moved out again. Just as they passed each other, the little girl at the back of the group suddenly broke free from the adults. She stumbled toward Arnold and desperately grabbed the corner of his dark navy uniform. You're Admiral Arnold, aren't you? The little girl looked up, her face covered in dust. Arnold stopped, taking a half crouch to look her squarely in those bloodshot eyes. Yes. Trembling, the little girl opened her muddy palm. She shoved a piece of cloth, entirely soaked in dark crimson, right into his large tactical glove. The big brother put his clothes on me, and then he got hurt. He got hurt so badly. Her crying voice echoed across the empty camp. Did you find him? He didn't die, right? Arnold's eyes fell on the oversized black tactical vest she was wearing, and his pupils shrank to pinpricks. Stiffly, millimeter by millimeter, he unrolled the sticky piece of cloth in his hand. It was a military dog tag, stained deep red, clearly stamped with the numbers 96511. The world seemed to hit mute in that exact second. Those hands, which had received countless medals, which were as steady as a rock when firing a gun, were now shaking violently enough for everyone to see. Arnold's atoms apple-bobbed with agonizing difficulty. He opened his mouth, but only a hoarse, broken breath made it out. Brant. A second later, he grabbed the little girl's shoulders, the edges of his eyes instantly bursting with scarlet veins. His voice entirely lost its reason. Where is he? Where was he hurt? Terrified, the little girl burst into loud sobs, pointing toward the back while she hiccuped. I don't know. He was covered in crimson, lying on the ground. He couldn't stand up. She suddenly whipped her head around, crying as she screamed at Carrie, who wasn't far away. You liar. You said you would go save him. Give me back the treasure he gave me. Arnold froze completely. What treasure? It's a hard little board. He said it had important things inside and told me to bring it out to give to you. Boom! A violent blast of airflow instantly flipped the surrounding dirt into the sky. The grass and trees swayed wildly under the sheer, suffocating pressure. Arnold looked like an enraged beast whose reverse scale had been pierced. His crimson eyes nailed themselves to Carrie, every vein in his neck bulging dangerously. He scooped up the little girl and let out a throat-tearing roar. Everyone on me. Into the camp. Now! Their frantic sprint kicked up a massive cloud of yellow sand. After bypassing several scorched craters, Arnold slammed on the brakes deep within the camp. His chest heaved violently, cold sweat pouring down his jaw. Following the little girl's dazed line of sight, Brant saw a maze-like cluster of yellow dirt civilian houses. The fading light of the setting sun wept over those bullet-riddled, low walls. The broken doors and windows wailed in the wind. Huddled together, quiet and silent, they looked like solitary graves standing in the golden light, waiting to be claimed. What do we do? The little girl grabbed Arnold's shirt in despair. I don't remember which path it was. I will find him. Arnold half-crouched, the hem of his navy coat sweeping against the dusty ground. He took a long, deep look at the tear-streaked girl, his cold, hard voice softening for the very first time. Don't cry. That slightly trembling "don't cry" instantly bridged across the long years, striking the hovering Brant right in the chest. The images overlapped before his eyes. In the warm sun of his memories, A 10-year-old Brant sat all alone on the edge of the hospital flower bed, holding the square wooden box containing his father's ashes. The sunlight made the tears at the corners of his eyes crystal clear. A grim-faced teenager in a crisp uniform stood against the light. The sun traced the sharp, though still youthful, lines of his brow. The teenager frowned slightly, as if faced with the world's hardest problem. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out a clumsy, unfamiliar hand, his rough thumb gently wiping the tears from Brant's cheek. "Your father is a hero. You should be proud of him." Don't cry. That was the first time the gears of destiny clicked together. Brant thought it was just a fleeting encounter, yet it replayed countless times in his memory. And right now, that same hand that had clumsily wiped his tears was desperately tearing through the rubble on the line between life and death. The only difference was, this time, the one stepping permanently out of reach was Brant himself. Arnold charged alone into the perilous dirt-yellow alleys. His combat boots frantically crushed the debris. His breathing was heavy and ragged as he searched through the labyrinth of houses one by one. Boom! A towering blaze mixed with a shockwave blasted outward, instantly swallowing the tall figure in a sky full of yellow dust. Before the smoke even cleared, Arnold violently coughed and struggled up from the ruins. His temple had been sliced open by shrapnel, and dark red drops rolled down his brow, smashing into the dirt. Yet, without so much as a blink, he stumbled madly into the adjacent half-collapsed low house. And then, his footsteps were permanently nailed to the ground. A faint ray of evening sun pierced through the ash, illuminating the corner. Brant leaned quietly against the base of the wall. His pristine white medic uniform was completely soaked through with dark crimson. The pool spreading beneath him stained the dry yellow earth with a blindingly bright red web. There was no longer a single trace of a living breath left in him. Arnold's pupils instantly lost their focus, his jaw trembling violently and uncontrollably. This S-class alpha, who had never once furrowed his brow while walking through mountains of corpses and seas of fire, looked as though his spine had been ripped out. He crashed heavily to his knees in front of that freezing body. His eyes widened in blank horror, his lips shaking so badly he couldn't make a sound. This was absolute terror, a fear that made his very soul shudder. He didn't dare to check for a pulse. He didn't dare to listen for a heartbeat. Clenching his jaw tight, his trembling hands grabbed the bandages straight from the first aid kit, frantically trying to plug the horrifying wounds on Brant's thigh and ribs. Then, he scooped that feather-light body tightly into his arms, protecting it like a madman guarding the last dying spark of a fire, and charged wildly out of the dead labyrinth. The armored vehicle's engine roared deafeningly, the cabin bouncing violently as it sped along. "He needs coagulant." Carrie lunged toward the stretcher with the medicine. "Get lost." Arnold's head snapped up. He looked like an enraged beast backed into a corner, his eyes entirely bloodshot. A furious surge of alpha energy instantly slammed Carrie to the floor. "Don't touch him." The cabin fell deathly silent. Not a single soldier dared to take a deep breath. Arnold snatched the medical powder, carefully cradling Brant's pale face against his own chest. Those hands, which had steadily accepted medals under the gaze of the entire alliance, were now shaking so hard they couldn't even grip the medical scissors. The pure white powder scattered with the jolts of the vehicle, dusting over the ruined uniform, most of it wasted. He could only use his mud-stained fingers to clumsily, desperately press down on the gauze that was still seeping. In the corner, the little girl wrapped in the oversized tactical vest shivered. Tears washed away the mud on her face. Is the big brother going to die? Is he dying because he saved me? No. Arnold buried his head deeply. Hot liquid silently smashed against Brant's ice-cold cheek, his voice broken beyond recognition. He won't die. Hovering near the roof of the vehicle, Brant quietly watched this unfold. If he could touch her, he would have loved to pat the girl's head and tell her it wasn't her fault. His memories rapidly flashed back to that dark supply closet. Amidst the hail of gunfire, a rapidly fading Brant had draped the overly large tactical vest over the girl. He shoved the silver memory drive, reeking of gunpowder, and snatched from the enemy, at the cost of his own life, into her tiny palm. Run out the window and find Admiral Arnold. The loss of vitality was starting to blur Brant's vision, but he still tried his best to curve his lips into a warm, albeit weak, smile. What does he look like? The girl gripped the drive tightly. Leaning against the freezing wall, a flash of extreme softness passed through Brant's eyes. He murmured softly, the tallest, the most handsome, yet the saddest-looking alpha. Why is he sad? Probably because of me. Brant looked down at his own stained fingertips, feeling a sensory-depriving cold slowly creeping in. He sighed softly, almost to himself. Hez mad at me, and he hasn't forgiven me yet. That was why he wouldn't spare an extra glance, wouldn't say a single word. He wouldn't even offer the charity of a passing high five. The armored vehicle slammed on its brakes at the base hospital. Piercing red emergency lights tore through the night. Brant's battered body was quickly rushed into the trauma room. A single door separated the hallway into two completely polarized worlds. Recently rescued family members and wounded soldiers held each other tightly. Under the warm yellow corridor lights, an alpha kissed his Omega's forehead with tears in his eyes. Thank God you're safe. You came back. That joyous laughter, that warm body heat, formed an invisible yet indestructible glass wall, entirely shutting out the ruined Arnold. The tall admiral stared blankly at the reunited couples. Suddenly, his straight knees crashed heavily onto the freezing marble floor. What about my Omega? A hoarse, tearing whisper slipped through his trembling fingers. The man curled his spine in utter despair. Brant, don't go, please. This is impossible. Karras' eyes shook violently in the corner, his back pressed against the wall as he shook his head frantically. In the next second, Arnold violently lunged forward. His forearm pinned Carrie's throat to the wall like an iron bar. Terrifying scarlet veins bulged in the Admiral's eyes, and his jaw locked into an absolutely ruthless angle. You had better pray Brant survives, or else it'll end you. Arnold only let go when Carrie's face shifted from pale white to a suffocating deep purple, dropping him like a pile of mud. A few terrified soldiers rushed up, dragging the violently coughing Carrie away. Hovering in the air, Brant watched the scene in pure disbelief. Was Arnold worried about him? But why? That forever calm, glacier-like admiral had never once flinched in the face of countless sacrifices. Moreover, Brant was just his Omega in name, someone he thoroughly despised. Are you angry again? The little girl in the corner looked up timidly, tugging at Arnold's stained pant leg. The big brother said you were mad at him and sad. When you get mad, do you treat him like this too? Arnold turned his neck stiffly. The color drained completely from his face in a flash. No, he trembled. His eyes remained locked onto the glowing red light of the trauma room. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down with immense, suppressed difficulty. I wasn't mad at him. I didn't even understand it myself, The man's eyes were completely red. I will tell him the truth when I see him again. I'll tell him that actually. Bang. The doors to the trauma room were violently slammed open. The military doctor burst into the hallway, his gloves still stained with red, his voice urgent and cruel. Captain Brant's heart has stopped. Please notify the next of kin immediately. We can only maintain him for another 40 minutes. His heart stopped? Arnold looked as if his very soul had been ripped out of him. He stared dumbly at the cold metal doors. Broken, murmured syllables got stuck in his throat. How could he not hold on? How? Brant's spirit quietly watched the man in front of him. Suddenly, the air in the corridor warped with extreme violence. A visible pale blue aura was frantically seeping out from the very depths of Arnold's bones. The man's chest heaved violently, his cold face burning with an unnatural, furious flush. It was the absolute, uncontrollable explosion of an S-class Alpha's root. The fluorescent lights in the hallway began to flicker wildly, screaming with overloaded electricity. The heavy energy fluctuation was like a massive physical wave, forcing the surrounding beta doctors and nurses to retreat. The crowd evacuated downstairs in sheer terror. Within less than a minute, that pale blue glow transformed into a raging dark blue inferno, looking as if it would burn Arnold and the entire hospital down to ashes. A beta doctor tried to rush forward to inject a suppressant, only to be forcefully blasted meters away by the materialized dark blue airflow, slamming heavily into the wall. Amidst the totally berserk dark blue sea of fire, Arnold staggered to his feet. Like a walking corpse, he dragged himself step by step toward the trauma room. He pressed his burning forehead hard against the door, digging his nails deep into the cracks of the panels. Scarlet drops slid down his fingertips. He let out a wail like a trapped, weeping beast. "Brant, give me one more chance. Please." In that exact instant, Brant, who had lost all his senses, suddenly felt an incredibly dense, damp energy wrapped tightly around him. The dark blue flames breached the boundary of life and death, turning into a heavy storm of interwoven pine branches and freezing rain, crashing down relentlessly upon his transparent soul. Pulled by this near-insane magnetic force, the ethereal spirit suddenly lost gravity. A second later, a massive dark vortex of irresistible magnetism completely swallowed him whole. The raging beast was pinned to the isolation bed by potent suppressants. The thick leather restraints dug deep into Arnold's bulging veins. During the gaps of his intense loss of control, fractured dreams flashed frantically in his mind. The frail boy silently weeping while holding the urn, the homeland turned to ruins by war, and the cruel, high-sounding mask of ice he had purposely built just to push Brant away. But all those glaciers had shattered violently in the banquet hallway the night before his deployment. A slightly tipsy Brant had stumbled into the tall admiral, blocking his path. The corners of his eyes were flushed red, his wet eyes brimming with unshed tears. Brant blinked his long eyelashes slowly, casting fluttering shadows over his pale cheeks. He tilted his head up, his trembling, soft lips pressing defenselessly against the cold corner of Arnold's mouth. In an instant, countless soft, burning, invisible vines sprouted from thin air. Those tipsy floral branches climbed up the towering pine tree with undeniable force, growing wildly under the moonlight. And that deep pine forest, which was usually so dominating and always kept up an icy defense, didn't mount even a sliver of resistance. It simply allowed that soft, dark fragrance to root itself deeply into his very bones. The magnetic pull of a 100% match had planted its fatal roots right in that moment. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors sounded like a rebooting countdown. Brant struggled to open his eyes under the harsh, cold white fluorescent lights. His vision slowly shifted from blurry to focused, landing on the authoritative face of Commander-in-Chief Denny at his bedside. "Dr. Brant, you have rendered a great service. You may ask one request of the Alliance." The noise from the next ward bled through the wall. Brant slowly blinked his dry eyes. His chapped lips parted as he used the very last breath in his lungs to force out incredibly hoarse syllables. "I want to end my marriage with Admiral Arnold." Bang! The ajar hospital door was violently smashed open by a brutal force. Arnold looked like a hollow shell completely drained of vitality. He staggered and nailed himself to the side of the bed. His eyes were covered in terrifying scarlet veins, his stubble messy. That pale face, which was always so aloof and unreachable, was now etched with a desperation and wretchedness that looked ready to tear a person apart. His chest heaved violently, yet the air around him was so dead silent it didn't stir a single ripple. "Why?" General Denny furrowed his brows, shooting a sidelong glance at his devastated son. Brant's pale fingertips curled slightly at his side. Through the cold oxygen mask, he managed an incredibly difficult, pale, yet soft smile. It was a silent comfort and a total release. "It's me." Brant weakly looked away. "I want to marry someone I love." However, the divorce papers that should have been signed never appeared. In their place was Arnold's near-obsessive constant presence. This S-class alpha, who once struck terror into the hearts of the enemy, now rolled up his dark navy sleeves. Using those rough, calloused hands, he almost religiously wiped down every inch of the wounds on the Omega lying in the bed. In the dead of night, the moonlight stretched the man's broad shoulders into an overwhelmingly imposing, lonely shadow. Arnold was like a silent statue. His still red eyes were locked tightly onto Brant's pale face, neurotically counting the weak rise and fall of his chest. "You don't have to do this." Brant softly broke the dead silence. The divorce was my own choice. We don't have to wait until the war ends. Tomorrow we can. Don't move around. Arnold's large, calloused hand pressed down firmly, pinning Brant's frail shoulder with an undeniable magnetism. That burning body heat bled right through the thin hospital gown, like a raging wildfire, instantly searing through Brant's skin. Do you have a fever? Arnold's voice was hoarse and heavy. He didn't pull his hand away. Instead, he firmly pressed his entire broad palm against Brant's forehead. Your hand is too hot. You can't tell. Brant shrank back stiffly. Is that right? An even larger shadow cascaded over him. Arnold leaned down, his high-bridged nose brushing right past Brant's cheek. Those dry yet scorching lips pressed down with an inescapable dominance, landing a heavy, lingering brand on the corner of Brant's forehead. Brant went completely rigid, his eyelashes trembling violently. I don't have a fever. You don't need to stay here to fulfill your alpha duties. I won't go back on my word. Arnold slowly straightened up. His deep brow cast a dangerous yet deeply wounded shadow as he stared intensely into those panicked eyes. Are you chasing me away? Brant didn't dare to look at him again. A tidal wave of exhaustion washed over him. Half closing his eyes, he tucked half his face into the pure white blanket and gave a gentle shake of his head. Everything can wait until you recover and are discharged. The man deliberately softened his low, raspy voice. Go to sleep. The moment the words fell, a vast, invisible emerald forest abruptly rose within the room. That heavy wave of pine, rich with damp rain, turned into a massive, soft, airtight net. It flawlessly wrapped Brant and the entire bed deep into a comforting, addictive sanctuary. Under this domineering yet gentle soothing, Brant lost all his strength to resist and slipped peacefully into a deep slumber. In the early autumn a month later, Brant was finally discharged. In the narrow hallway of the dormitories, Arnold's towering frame blocked out the dim light. He grabbed Brant's arm without leaving any room for argument, his dark navy sleeve brushing against Brant's shoulder. The military families have moved in, so the dorms have been reshuffled. You're staying with me. Brant stopped at the landing of the stairs. He didn't yield to that heart-palpitating force and walk up. Instead, gently yet with undeniable resolve, he pulled his arm out of those large, calloused hands inch by inch. He took one step up the stairs by himself, finally putting his eyes level with the Alpha who was always so high above him. No. Sunlight pierced through the corner window, slicing half of Arnold's cold face into the deep shadow cast by the bridge of his nose. That large, empty hand froze in midair. The fingertips spasmed uncontrollably for a second, before slowly tightening into a fist. Why? The man's voice was as heavy as lead. Looking into that shadow, a soft, almost liberated smile rippled across Brant's pale lips. We are annulling our marriage very soon. Living together would be inconvenient. Arnold's pupils instantly contracted. He stared hard at Brant, as if he were meeting the Omega in front of him for the very first time. My leg can't handle weight-bearing training anymore. I've already applied for a position at the downtown military hospital, and it'll be starting soon. Brant completely ignored the suddenly plunging, oppressive temperature in the air. He even reached out on his own initiative to take the duffel bag from Arnold's other hand, his tone as casual as if they were discussing the weather. Could you find a car and drop me off at a hotel in the city for the night? The two of them were locked in a stalemate in the light and shadows. The veins on the back of Arnold's hand bulged, his grip on the handle absolute. Can't you stay in the Alliance Army? If you don't like working at the hospital, I can. I do like it. Brant smiled, cutting him off. His fingertips deliberately avoided any possible skin contact. I can do clinical work while studying for my master's. This way, even if I don't go to the battlefield, I can still help a lot of people. Admiral Arnold. The heavy combat boots suddenly stopped short on the stairs. Arnold's jawline tightened to its absolute limit. He spun around, grabbing the bag and taking wide strides down the stairs. I'll take you. The dim, amber light in the hotel entryway acted like an ambiguous net, firmly trapping Arnold's broad shoulders. After setting the luggage down, those long legs inside the dark boots seemed to take root in the thick carpet. In the confined space, the temperature began to climb at a deeply unsettling pace. It's getting late. Drive safely on your way back. Brant took a half step back. Arnold didn't move. His massive frame blocked out most of the light, entirely blanketing Brant in his deeply invasive shadow. He took a step closer to Brant, his voice as stiff as if he were issuing a military order. Your leg hasn't been hot compressed today. Can you guarantee that your massage technique and pressure will be exactly right? Brant turned his head away, his long lashes hiding the turbulence in his eyes. "I'm a military doctor. Did you forget?" Dead silence. Even the tiny specks of dust in the air seemed to halt under the suffocating tension between them. Brant suddenly looked up, staring straight into those deep eyes, and dropped a depth charge with absolute calm. "You don't have to leave if you don't want to. That way tomorrow, you can go straight to register the divorce with me." That face, which usually wouldn't flinch even if a mountain collapsed before him, finally showed a miserable crack the second the word divorce hit the floor. Arnold's jaw clamped shut abruptly. The dark gleam that had just sparked in his eyes was extinguished, like a basin of ice water had been dumped over his head. From that day on, whenever registration was mentioned, the heavily armed admiral suddenly became the busiest man in the entire alliance. He asked about Brant's well-being right on time every single day, yet he avoided the word divorce like the plague. A week later at the military hospital, the halls reeked of pungent disinfectant. Brant was smiling and waving goodbye to the Alpha doctor beside him, but out of the corner of his eye, an incredibly icy low-pressure zone sharply stung him. Arnold stood dead center in the ward hallway like a grim reaper, his face livid. Those razor-sharp eyes were locked onto the departing Alpha doctor, the air around him practically freezing into solid frost. Brant dropped his smile and walked up to him. "Are you here for the divorce?" Arnold's face visibly worsened. He violently shifted his gaze away, coughing against his knuckles as a cover-up. His cold, hard voice carried a suspicious rasp and a hint of red. "I'm sick. I came to see a doctor. A cold." Brant shoved his hands into his white coat pockets, looking at him as if he were an unreasonable stranger. Driving 2 hours to this overcrowded military hospital for a cold seems like a bit of a waste of resources. Admiral Arnold, I want you to treat me. Brant's heart gave a sudden, sharp throb. Once upon a time, whenever this man got even a minor injury, Brant would cross through the crowd to personally hand the medicine to his guards. But now, you should register at internal medicine. Brant turned away expressionlessly. "I'm a surgeon now. I can't treat you." Just as they brushed past each other, a burning hot, massive hand tightly seized Brant's arm. The grip was crushing, like a dying man clinging to the last piece of driftwood. "Brant." It sounded as though Arnold had used every ounce of strength in his body to force it out of his chest. The proud man painfully bowed his head, his voice so hoarse it was almost a plea. "Actually, I just wanted to see you." The corners of Brant's eyes uncontrollably flared with a faint red, but he did not turn around. Calmly, one by one, he pried off the fingers of that scalding hand. "Admiral Arnold, please find the time to register for the divorce as soon as possible. Stop doing pointless things." Word for word, he returned the exact same verdict that had once shattered his own heart. A few days later, the emergency siren blasted at the end of the hall. Separated by dozens of meters, Brant locked eyes with the man who was completely coated in crimson. A terrifying bone-deep gash tore across Arnold's arm. Yet he seemed to have completely lost his sense of pain, letting the anxious medical staff crowd around to treat him. Those abyss-like eyes were nailed strictly onto Brant. The air began to writhe restlessly. An incredibly thick scent of pine, reeking of despair and pleading, morphed into countless invisible damp vines and sharp pine needles, recklessly tangling themselves around Brant. His gland started to burn under this dominating yet intensely pathetic power. The intercom at the nurse's station rang like crazy. "Dr. Brant, Admiral Arnold specifically requested you to personally debride and suture his wound." Brant quietly watched that dark silhouette in the distance. He dug his nails hard into his palms, using the coldest, most emotionless voice possible into the receiver. "Please give the Admiral my apologies. I have a surgery to attend to. I don't have the time." Ding! The cold metal elevator doors slid open. Brant didn't give the man a single millimeter of a glance, walking straight into the car. The metal doors slowly closed before him, completely and cruelly severing Arnold's burning stare, along with that overwhelming roaring tide of pine. After that incident, Brant applied to the hospital to support a city in the southern war zone. In the quiet, rust-proof stairwell, pale incandescent lights sliced across the steps. Brant lowered his lashes, staring at the unanswered text message on his screen, and hit the dial button. The call was picked up almost instantly. The man's breathing was as ragged and heavy as a broken bellows. "Brant, are you leaving because of me?" "Yes." Brant's voice held zero emotion. "The war in the South is unstable." The panting in the earpiece suddenly spiked, laced with a tremor he couldn't hide. "I'll agree to whatever you want. Just don't go. Please." Brant's grip on the phone tightened slightly, his knuckles whitening. His sharp senses picked up that the heavy panting wasn't just in his ear, it was overlapping with an echo in the stairwell. He slowly turned around, walked over to the handrail, and looked down from above at the landing on the floor below. In the shadowy corner, the tall man looked like a trapped, solitary beast. Arnold's dark navy uniform was a mess, his chest heaving violently. He tipped his head back, staring desperately up at Brant. The pure white bandages wrapped around his right arm were visibly bleeding through, forming a horrifying patch of scarlet. "Brant." Arnold's Adam's apple bobbed with immense struggle, his eyes full of pathetic begging. "Don't go, please?" Watching those dripping red drops, the corners of Brant's eyes uncontrollably reddened, but his jaw remained locked tight. "Tomorrow we register. Deal?" Arnold's pupils instantly contracted, his cracked lips quivering. Actually, I know exactly what you said to Carrie." Brant cut him off coldly. Every word was like a razor-sharp blade of ice, precisely severing the man's final struggle. "You denied our relationship. You believed I was a deserter. You said you wanted to marry an Omega you loved. Admiral Arnold, stop doing pointless things." The once absolutely dominating air in the stairwell suddenly shattered to pieces like a collapsing glacier. "Now, it's me who doesn't believe you." Brant turned his back, the hem of his white coat carving out a ruthless arc in the air. A severely hoarse, soul-drained whisper drifted from behind him. "Okay, I'll be there on time tomorrow. I'm sorry." On the wall of the council hall, the second hand of the clock ticked away in dead silence. The mottled light of the evening sun slowly faded from the empty chair next to Brant. His communicator buzzed violently. The bodyguard's sobbing voice tore through the peace. "Dr. Brant, the Admiral was in a car crash on the way here. Has critically injured. He can't make the appointment." Brant shot to his feet, an incredibly absurd, cold sneer pulling at his lips. "Ha! Do me a favor and tell the Admiral that these childish games are way out of style. Tell him to get his ass over here right this second. The Admiral, he really can't come." Brant violently cut the connection, yet his chest felt as if a massive, invisible hand was squeezing the life out of it. Even his breathing tasted metallic. He bolted toward the military hospital like a madman. The moment he shoved through the glass doors, the red emergency lights at the far end of the hall were flashing violently, painting the entire corridor red. "Emergency notice. All attending physicians to the ER immediately." What happened? Brant grabbed a sprinting colleague, his fingers trembling so badly he could barely grip the sleeve. An officer was hit by a car trying to save a hostage. When he was brought in, he was barely holding on to his last breath. Brant stumbled as he shoved through the crowd. The blindingly white corridor stretched into a twisted band of light before his eyes. Outside the emergency room doors, the guard, covered in red, was crying on his knees. Looking like a soulless marionette, Brant mechanically pushed open the heavy metal doors. Under the blinding surgical lights, Arnold lay quietly in a pool of crimson. That once arrogant, unbeatable face was now so pale it blended right into the bedsheets beneath him. Beep! The jumping green waves on the monitor ruthlessly flattened into a glaring straight line the exact second he stepped into the room. The long, continuous tone pierced through the entire room. The doctor beside the bed helplessly dropped his hands, removing the oxygen mask from that entirely colorless face. They gave up on him. This hero of the entire alliance, His alpha had been taken away by the grim reaper. Brant's knees slammed heavily into the cold tiles. The gland at the back of his neck felt like a raging wildfire, the excruciating burn forcing out the tears that had pooled in his eyes. He scrambled to his feet on all fours and threw himself at the bedside. "How could you die? We haven't even divorced yet. Get up. We won't get divorced, okay?" No answer. "Why are you still lying there?" "Arnold, I hate you. Why didn't you even give me the chance to hate you, to get back at you?" It hurt so much. His heart felt like it was shattering, and his gland burned with agonizing pain. Brant slowly leaned close to him, letting his own honeysuckle fragrance melt right into Arnold's pine scent. Carrying scorching tears, his soft lips pressed devoutly, desperately onto the man's icy forehead, his brow, the tip of his nose, and finally sealed tightly against those thin lips that could no longer issue any commands. In the exact instant their lips touched, warm, incredibly dominating, invisible vines grew wildly from Brant's very bones. Ignoring the boundary of death, they aggressively tangled around the broken dead wood, continuously pouring every ounce of vibrant, burning vitality straight into the dead ruins. Beep. An extremely faint electronic chirp pierced the dead silence. Immediately following it, beep, beep, beep. The flat line on the screen, as if injected with scorching magma, violently leaped into a series of powerful rhythmic peaks. The early morning sun pierced through the blinds, slicing warm streaks of light across the pristine hospital bed. Arnold's heavy eyelids twitched and slowly opened. The moment those deep pupils focused, they locked instantly onto Brant, who was resting his head by the bed. "It was you. You saved me." The man's voice was as rough as sandpaper. Brant's head shot up, his eyes instantly turning entirely red. "Don't cry," Arnold rasped. Brant haphazardly scrubbed the tear tracks from his face with the back of his hand. Putting on a tough front, he looked away coldly. "Those are tears of joy. Now that you're awake, let's proceed with the divorce." Arnold frowned slightly, yet a weak, indulgent curve tugged at the corner of his pale lips. "You went back on your word." "What?" "I heard everything you said in the trauma room." Arnold's gaze was so tender it could almost drown a person. "You said we wouldn't get divorced." Brant's jaw tightened, glaring back in sheer defiance. "You went back on your word too. You clearly said you'd be at the registry on time that day." Under the sunlight, Arnold struggled to slide his pale hand, riddled with IV marks, out from under the blanket. His long, rough index finger curled slightly, gently but undeniably hooking onto Brant's trembling pinky resting on the edge of the bed. "I saved you once, and you saved me once. I lied to you once, and you lied to me once. We're even, okay?" The shattered morning light reflected in the depths of the man's eyes. His voice was low and solemn. "Hello, I am Arnold, the Alpha forcibly assigned to you by the Alliance Council. I'm very glad you are my Omega." The tears in Brant's eyes finally broke the dam and poured down. He bit down hard on his lower lip, forcefully linking their fingers together in return, and broke into a tearful smile. "Hello, I am Brant, the Omega forcibly assigned to you by the Alliance Council. I am very unhappy. I will hide the fact that you are my Alpha until you have thoroughly earned my forgiveness." A resonating pulse of heat spread from their intertwined pinkies. Arnold gazed at him, the frost and snow in his eyes completely melting away in the warm sun of early autumn. "All right, as you command."
And that is where our story ends. At first, watching Brant get hurt time and time again by Arnold's biting, icy words, yet carefully and optimistically hiding his true heart, was absolutely heartbreaking. As Brant's ethereal spirit drifted through the war-torn ruins, we stood right beside him to witness a completely unfamiliar Arnold, entirely stripped of his cold mask. The second he saw that crimson-stained dog tag, the invincible god of war, a man who wouldn't flinch if a mountain collapsed before him, completely lost his mind. He dug desperately with his bare hands through those heavily mined houses. Outside the trauma room, consumed by absolute terror and heartbreak, he triggered a violently berserk, dark blue rut. It turned out that beneath Arnold's freezing exterior hid an intense, overwhelming love for Brant. Fortunately, Brant woke up, and Arnold finally realized where his heart belonged. But by then, Brant had already learned to let go. With a shattered heart, he took the initiative to ask for a divorce, just wanting to set the other man free. Yet another agonizing ordeal ultimately shattered the thick ice between these two deeply in love souls. When they reached out their pinkies on that hospital bed, reintroducing themselves with red, tear-filled eyes, my anxious heart finally landed in a warm, safe place. This union, bound together against their will and tested by life and death, finally found the most healing embrace after an ultimate, intense collision. Did you enjoy this ending? Feel free to drop a comment below and join the discussion. We'll see you in the next one.